Hey, welcome back, everybody. Craig Peterson here, WGAN Online. Of course, CraigPeterson.com. No surprise there. This next one is kind of an interesting article, interesting question that was raised. How should you address the question that I'm sure you ask or are asked, right? Which is, how secure are we? You know, you're listening to the show because you are the cavalry, is the bottom line. You're the person who your family comes to, or the business owner comes to, the business comes to, when they have a tech question, right? You wouldn't be listening otherwise. This is how you get ahead. This is how you learn. You're listening to me, you're listening to others, you're reading articles. You are the cavalry. So, how does the cavalry answer that question? When you're asked, how secure are we? You know, there's the obvious answer. Well, we got this and we got that. And, we got antivirus, we got a firewall. Those, frankly, are buzzwords that many of us use just to obfuscate the real answer to that question. And I know that many times when we go into a business and we secure it, we put together a proposal, most of the time, in fact, our proposals are not accepted. Most of the time when we go into a business and we say, here's what you need to do in order to stay secure, they say, no, thank you. And they just run, right, with blinders on. Hopefully they're not going to stumble in the middle of the night, get tossed by that horse of just kind of ignoring it, right? Blinders, or maybe you might want to call it ostriching. I don't know what you want to call it. But most of the time, in reality, the businesses just don't do anything. Sometimes they do, right? That's how I stay in business. I stay in business because of the companies that really want to stay secure. And I stay in business because of the people that are the cavalry. They're like you, who want to buy my courses to understand more, to get step-by-step instructions. No, not just the stories behind things, but the strategy and the exact tactics that they have to take. And that's you, I suspect, right? I think you're probably a lot like me in that way. That's how I like to learn, and that's how I teach as well. Well, this article is from our friends over at Dark Reading. And the question is, how secure are we? And how should we answer that? And there's a great response by Curtis Minder. He's the CEO of GroupSense. And he says it really depends. You've got to look at your executive team and qualify that, because answering the question with the answer of, well, we have antivirus, we have a firewall, we have mail filters, a lot of people nowadays are saying, well, we're in the cloud, so there's nothing to worry about, which we already know isn't true, right? There's actually more to worry about if you're in the cloud than if you have a local server. But I really think the way to address this and to look at this, for those of you who are the kind of computer security people for your organization, is that you got to find out where they are coming from. You have to know, hey, are we supposed to compare ourselves, for instance, to what the payment card industry says we're supposed to do, which is the PCI DSS? Are we supposed to compare ourselves to the HIPAA high-tech regulations? In other words, we have some medical data, which, by the way, every company does if you have any sort of a health insurance program, right? Are we supposed to compare ourselves to the NIST 171 standard? And now there's even more. There's the CMMCs. There's a lot of different standards that are out there. So you got to understand that. How should I answer this question? How secure are we? Compared to what? Are we comparing ourselves to similar companies in our industry? Companies that are similar in size to us? No matter how you're going to answer that question, when the boss comes a-knocking, or the kids or the wife, husband comes a knocking saying, how secure are we? No matter who it is you're talking to, I think the one thing you have to make sure of is that they understand that the whole security threat landscape is fluid. And because it's constantly changing, their security programs need to be fluid as well. And that's the reason I have consulting clients, right? That's the reason I have a membership program. So that people who are the cavalry can follow and understand what it is they need to know. Now, I want to hop over to this other guy here. His name is Matt Combs, and he is a global cybersecurity practice leader for an executive recruiter called Russell Reynolds Associates. And this is absolutely phenomenal interview on CIO.com. He's saying many companies were blissfully unaware that they've been breached, especially those that don't have credit card information. How many times have I said that, right? It takes at least 6 months for the average company to even know they've been breached. So why did Matt say, especially those that don't have credit card information? It's because if they have credit card information, that information is likely to be sold on the open market very quickly. And once that information is sold, the credit card companies are going to notice, right? But many companies have only learned that they were breached after the FBI came knocking on their door and told them they had a problem. Look at Home Depot, what happened. The FBI traced the dots. Home Depot had been compromised through point-of-sale equipment. Can you believe that? People sitting in the parking lot of Home Depot hacked them, and they didn't even know it until the FBI knocked on their door. That's a pretty big deal on a pretty big company. I think, aren't they like the second largest retailer in the country when it comes to dollar value sold? Okay. So if you don't have the credit card information, how would you even know that you've been hacked? So there you go. Again, it ties back into fluidity of security. And it seems so obvious now when you look back at Home Depot and say, what were they thinking? Look at the Target, the TJX companies, and how they were hacked. They had security equipment, and that security equipment was actually pretty good stuff. And it was alerting them, telling them, whoa, wait a minute, guys, we've got a breach, okay? Something we should be taking care of. Did they take care of it? No, because they didn't know how to read the output, and they didn't have enough people to look at the logs, which is something else we keep telling people. You got to watch the logs. You have to watch them closely. It's a full-time job. It's a highly skilled job, a highly trained job. This is not cheap, okay? And then he goes on to say, I know another hotel company with 500 hotels in the United States. Of course, you can look that up, find out who it is. They have a chief information security officer who is an information security group of one. So think about that, 500 hotels, just the business itself, all of the data that they have, the liability that they have. He doesn't have anyone working for him. He doesn't even have a support person. He has to beg, borrow, and steal help from IT and from the CIO, the Chief Information Officer. So when the executive asks you, how secure are we? You got to say, hey, listen, we can lock down the doors, we can lock down the windows, but the odds are if someone really, really wants to breach us, they will be able to. But make sure you really are locking down the doors and locking down the windows. You've got to close it all up. There's one other thing I think you should do when this non-tech executive asks you about how secure we are. And that is, what's your nightmare, Mr. Executive? Which systems are you most concerned about being compromised? But I think you should go back to the question I asked a little bit earlier, which is, what data do we have that maybe we shouldn't have? But what data do we have that we're most concerned about? What are the family jewels here in our organization? What is the data that if we were to lose it, we'd be in a lot of trouble, either because we could not conduct business anymore, or maybe we would get totally nailed by the regulators that are out there. So a lot of really, really good questions to ask, because you're never 100% secure. All it takes is for one employee to click on the wrong link on an email. Look at what I was just talking about. It's coming up a little later on today. But I talked about it this week on a number of radio stations. What happened with Cochrane, that investor from Shark Tank. Okay, and we'll talk about it a little bit later on, but man, that's all it takes. And frankly, employee negligence, such as accidental loss of data, accidental clicking on things, employee negligence is still the main cause of data breaches. And that's according to a report from Shred-it. Now, of course, they're in the business of shredding documents, of getting rid of these things, shredding hard disk drives when you take them out of a computer. But remote workers, external vendors are also now a major cause of the increase in data breaches. And that's one of the things we're going to be covering here in my course coming up in a couple of weeks. And that is the upstream-downstream risk. And the U.S. military is totally into this now, because they had 2 or 3 major breaches last year that came through vendors. So hackers are no match for human error when it comes to sheer numbers. You also have the insider threats of people who are literally stealing from you so that they can get a better job, take it with them to another job. You have people who are upset with you and are just making an absolute mess of things on their way out the doors. So be very careful about that, because it's huge. Data breaches cost an average of $3.6 million globally. Average. That was in 2017. And some of those prices have gone up. And the quicker you can respond to a breach, the more money that you'll save. In fact, they found that if you can respond to a breach within 30 days, on average, you'll save over $1 million. So think of that. The odds are good that you'll be breached, and you'll save on average $1 million. And yet you're not funding the security people by either going to an external contractor like me to take care of it for you, or you don't give the resources to the internal people to do it, because this is a huge, huge job. All right, top of the hour, of course, on the radio stations, we got news, traffic, weather, all that sort of stuff coming up. And then when we get back, we're going to talk about a new metric in security, the next gen security metrics. So stick around. Listening to Craig Peterson on WGAN.